Now, I can hear feedback. Is this all okay for you? Good. I can't hear it now. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about, we'll go on to the second slide now, please. Thank you. Just wanted to explain what I'm hoping to go through today with you. I'm happy for you to ask me any questions. I can't always see the chat. Let me see if I can see that coming through. So please, if you do have a chat, you might need to put your hand up to let me know. I'm not used to this system and I can't see. I've seen the chat earlier, but not now. Oh, there it is. Right, I've got it. So if you want to ask any questions and you're a little bit timid to put your hand up and ask it face to face, feel free to just put it in the chat and we'll try and pick that up. Now, the purpose of today's session really is to look at how marketing is applied. You'll have done loads of theory, I'm sure, or about to do loads of theory on marketing, marketing management, and different aspects of marketing. And that's not what plan for today is about. I'm hoping that what I can show you is how it's applied, how we can apply it in different ways to different settings, because I come from a business to business background, I come from business to consumer background, I've had really lovely products to work with, and I've had some really boring technical products to work with. So I want to share that with you. And also, one of the things I do, and I'll talk about a bit later, is that I'm an expert witness in marketing. So sometimes I go to court. And although this is about UK or even English law, I'll talk about some of the legal pitfalls when poor marketing happens, again, from my experience. So we go on to the third slide. I'll just explain a little bit about who I am. So you've probably gathered when I said I was over in JLUBHOPAL 9-10 years ago. I have an academic background. For the last 20 years, more than 20 years, I've been working in higher education. I was started as a lecturer in marketing, an associate dean, and my last job was as dean of Staffordshire Business School. I decided to leave there, and my last date was actually during lockdown, which wasn't great. Having a leaving during lockdown is quite fun, or not, but they made it special for me, and to set up my own business. And one of the things I wanted to do more of is more marketing, because when you're a dean of a business school, you do everything. Your people management, making sure the students are okay, courses are running okay, the quality, and marketing is just a very small part of it all. And I love marketing. I hope that comes through today. So I'm a senior academic, or have been a senior academic, and I still do academic work. Most of my clients are in the higher education business, and in it, quite a bit of that is international. So already I've had a telephone conversation or a Skype meeting, well, they don't do Skype, but the equivalent Zoom type meeting in China, the Chinese college there today. You can imagine that was a very early start, given that they're so many 8 hours ahead of us in the UK. So now I'm a director at Mountaintop's Perspective, and I do marketing, but I also do consultancy and training for people across all sorts of management areas. I'm a director of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, which is the only international professional marketing group, really. And so I'm really privileged to be a director of that, because I've been a member since I was a student, effectively. And so now I can give back to that. So that's a little bit about me. I love marketing, but I also have a higher educational background as well. So if we go on to the next slide, I think we've probably answered most of this question. I wanted to just check on who you are, because any good marketer should know who their audience is, or their customer. You're probably both at the moment. So I found out most of you are actually MBA students. Is there anybody who's not an MBA student? Okay, we'll be keeping quiet if you are, but if you're doing anything else, let me know, because then I will also try and make sure that what I talk about is relevant to yourself. You're all first year, from what I understand, and then the next question I'll ask, and you can just put this into the chat if you like, what do you want to do when you graduate? Because MBA obviously has got a broad range of areas that you can move into. Operation management, HR, accounting, finance, marketing. What is it that you want to do? I'm hoping some of you say marketing, but it doesn't matter if you don't. So just put that through as we're going through the next slides, okay? If you've got any idea of what you want to do when you graduate. So if we go on to the next slide, all my examples, I'm not going to give you loads of theory today, that's what I said. You can learn that for your tutors, but all my examples are based on really the companies that I've worked with before. So I'm just going to give some examples of the companies that I've worked with. 20 years of it's been in universities across the UK, across England. A couple have been quite small, a couple have been big. I've also been a principal of an HE college in London, where most of the students were international. So I've got good experience there. I did my university degree being sponsored by a company called Courtaulds Clothing. Courtaulds is a big organisation, and the clothing side of it would manufacture clothing for big retailers in the UK mainly, like Marks and Spencer's. So my actual training was in production management, and I went into marketing because I didn't like production. And my second placement at university was as marketing assistant for part of Courtaulds Clothing. And so I learned about fashion marketing there. My first job on graduation was with a plastics company called Barkston Industrial Plastics, where, as you'll see later, it wasn't a particularly exciting product range to work with, but I was marketing coordinator. Initial UK is part of Rentokil, which is an international organisation, but I'm not sure that it's got any Indian companies. And that's a service company, business to business, so providing services to other businesses in the likes of things like, part of it's Rentokil, which is killing rodents and things like that, which was not part of what I was about, but also what I was about, which was about workwear, a laundry service really, and I'll talk more about that later. And then Christie is probably a business that you can probably make more knowledge about, which is about hats, a company that made hats, and I'm going to talk about that quite a bit. So if we go on to the next slide, we get started properly. So what is marketing? Now, what I'd like you to do in 1 minute is really use the chat. Thanks to Kartik, who said that want to do advertising and content marketing. Brilliant. If anybody else wants to put down what you want to do, keep on doing that. But what I'd like you to do now, if everybody could just put maybe one thing or a couple of things on, what do you think marketing is? Put a couple of things down that you think marketing is, and I'll just stop for a minute or so while you put your responses in the chat.
So people can write in chat what they think is marketing.
Yeah. So we've got advertising, sales, promotion, brand. They're all parts of marketing. Anything else? Consumer, indeed. Central. Yeah. Attracting, getting customers, consumers. Brilliant. Delivering value to customers. Product design. Image. Right through from identifying needs. So we've got that right at the beginning to satisfy them. Some good answers here, as I would expect from an MBA group. Creating a brand name, indeed. Okay, just one or two more. Do you think of anything else?
Creating a brand name, identifying the needs, image. Anything else? What do you think is marketing, or any aspect of marketing would you like to mention to present the company in front of consumers? Very good.
Okay, brilliant. So let's go on to the next slide then. Oh, it's not showing. I think it might need to be clicked on. Okay, we've got marketing research, advertising, and another variant on creating communication and delivering value.
Yes.
Okay,
Can
the
you
next
see the slide, everyone? The new slide. What is marketing?
Yeah, next slide, please. Brilliant.
Okay.
Slide 7. Brilliant. These were just some things that I put down. There's so many things. So we've already had mentioned marketing research. Brilliant. New product development came through at one point. Advertising came through. Creative element came through. Nobody mentioned pricing, although we did say providing value, which could link to pricing. I think somebody did mention, began to mention about consumer behaviour. And there's all sorts of things there you can see. I mean, that sponsorship, exhibitions, advertising. What I liked was that most of you, promotion is really important to marketing, but there's so much more about marketing. New product development, market research, consumer behaviour, making sure there's customer value there. And you pick those up, which is really good. Because so many people nowadays, when they talk about marketing, just think about digital marketing, social media. And yet, to be good at social media, you need to know so much more. You've got that, that's great. So let's go on to the next slide. We've got a couple of definitions. The next slide. Brilliant. So some of you were, and there's quite a lot of definitions to marketing. Some of them will be about a philosophy of business really, encapsulated in marketing. And from a marketer's point of view, I don't think people can really do business very well if they don't have that marketing philosophy. Some talk about process, and some talk about systems, and some talk about people. So this one is a process definition. The process responsible for identifying, anticipating, and satisfying customer wants and needs. That's from the Chartered Institute of Marketing. So identifying people's needs. We need to do market research, marketing research. Do you know the difference between market and marketing research? A lot of people say they're doing market research when actually they're doing something bigger than that. Market research is about your market, the competitors, maybe segmentation to a certain extent, about the suppliers to that market. Marketing research is broader. It's about doing research on your promotion. It's about doing research on maybe consumer behaviour. And that's a bigger thing because it's all aspects of marketing. So there is a difference. Sometimes we use marketing when we mean market, and sometimes we mean market and we mean marketing. Just be aware. But the thing about marketing, it should be so easy. Work out what your customer wants. Make sure you give them the right product and it's at the right time. It's as simple as that. And yet so many companies fail because it assumes that we know who our customers are. And many of us don't. Many companies don't, even now. You can get so much data about customers nowadays, and yet we still don't really know who they are. Some of the big firms are very good at it. Some of the very small firms are. But in the middle, a lot of companies just, as long as they have enough customers, they don't really know who they are. They don't really care. But if we want to do added value, then we need to know who they are and create an avatar, some examples of who we think those people are, maybe give them names and an identity to help us when we're doing creative work. So we need to know what they are, who they are. We need to know what they want and what they will want in the future. And that's always difficult because people only know what they want now. They don't necessarily know what they want in the future. And that's where Apple and some of the other companies have been really good at creating a future that people want. Absolutely amazing. So that's marketing research, obviously, identifying what they want and then being able to produce what they want. So satisfying their needs. And there's a difference between needs and wants as well. some wants. I mean, I might say, I want a car that's purple and sparkly, and it's got a black inside, and it's got all these different gadgets. But actually what I need is a car for me to be able to take children to school or whatever it may be. And we can't always decide what somebody wants, but we can create potentially what they need and sell it that way to them, because we can't afford always to do what they want. And of course, that's the next bit. We have to do it profitably. And so many companies now all the time have looked at sales rather than profit. And profit is really important. Even if you're a not-for-profit organisation, surplus is important to be able to reinvest into the organisation. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide. Okay, the marketing mix. And I purposely got that picture of somebody in the kitchen. I'm sure you all know what the marketing mix is. And you know, when I started, it had 4 or 5 Ps 30 years ago, and then it became 7 Ps, and actually you can get 11, 17, 21. It really doesn't matter. I think when you get to 7 Ps, that's probably enough, because all they really are places for us to try and think about all the aspects of marketing. So as they get more complicated and longer, they're just separating out some of those elements. So I use the marketing mixes like code books, where I can place things and it reminder post-it notes, so that I remember to think about all aspects of marketing when I'm writing a plan. Because sometimes we get so focused on just promotion or another aspect that we forget about the rest of the mix. So I'm sure you all know that. You might have variations that you have to work with on your course. So these aren't the only versions of the marketing mix, but most people agree with these 7, and that people, process, and physical evidence are very much about the service side of a business. So I won't spend too much time on that, because hopefully you learned that a long time ago. So if we move on to the next slide. Okay, this is a bit different, I appreciate, but I'm just trying to make a point about what's right for my business might be wrong for your business in terms of marketing. What I do about my promotion, maybe I use LinkedIn most for my promotion, but I suggest to some companies they use Instagram because that's more relevant to them, or Facebook or something like that, but they don't suit my business. So today's menu, I'm going to show you how to make pancakes, Yorkshire pudding, pasta, and a white sauce. I'm going to go through this very quickly, just to give you an indication of how things are different. So we go on to the next slide, and I want to say that everything's got different cooking methods as well. Go on to slide 11, and I'll show you Yorkshire puddings. So next slide, please. Brilliant. Can we have the next slide, please? Has anybody had Yorkshire puddings? Everybody's quiet, so I'm assuming no.
And I heard it for the first time today.
Sorry. Yeah, next slide, please.
Yeah. Somehow
Is it stuck?
the slides are not moving.
Ah, there you are.
Appear to be stuck.
Yeah, now
yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. A little bit of English culture, British culture. On a Sunday, traditionally, we will have a roast dinner. It's traditionally when all the family come together and we sit down and we have a big dinner, which will have a roast, chicken, beef, pork, lamb, it doesn't matter for the meat. Roast potatoes, which actually this picture doesn't have, it has mashed potato, and something called Yorkshire puddings. I live in Yorkshire, so Yorkshire puddings is something that we use. And really, Yorkshire pudding is to add the starch, the carbohydrates, a bit like chapati, naan. It's a similar thing. In fact, in Yorkshire, normally they're much bigger and the food goes inside them. And these are made in the oven, very high temperature, and it's using flour, eggs, milk, and a bit of oil to make them. You mix it up into the batter on the bottom there, put it into a very hot oven for 20 minutes, and hopefully they rise and they look like that. They never do when I make them, so I buy them. Okay. The next one is pancakes. Using the same ingredients, flour, flour, eggs, milk, but in different combinations, a bit of oil. But this time, when you mix it up, and it can look like Yorkshire pudding when you mix it up as a batter, you fry it to create, I suppose the closest is a chapati or naan, a chapati, but it's used differently. And then you put butter or something, and there we have Kate tossing a pancake, which is what we do on Shrove Tuesday, just before Easter. So again, it's made differently, same ingredients, different proportions, different way to make it. And then we go on to the next slide. Pasta. Okay. Pasta with flour, eggs, and oil. That's all it is. Like noodles. You mix it and then you boil it. So again, different way of making pasta, but that same ingredients or same different types of ingredients there. Then we move on to the last one, just you know, which I thought was quite interesting. This is a sauce to make lasagna or I can't remember the other one. Greek meal. Again, it's flour, eggs, only the yellow bit of the eggs, milk and butter, and that creates a sauce, not a bread or not a pasta. Now, all I'm really showing here is that it's the same items being used differently to create completely different products. And that's what marketing's about. Now, is there any product? It's okay, we can go on to the next slide, actually, on to 15. Is there anything, because I couldn't see anything, is there a product, a food item that you eat that has egg, flour, oil, or butter, ghee? Can you think of one? Maybe milk, essentially.
I'm sure people can think of many Indian recipes that use flour, eggs, oil, ghee, milk.
It was just for my information because I wanted to put one in to this slide that was more Indian, and it doesn't. So when you're looking at case studies, this is just a very simple message, really. When you're looking at case studies, look at the different ways that they're using the 4 Ps, because every 5 or 7 Ps, because every organisation will use them. It's just how they use them. And even if they use the same, like they use Instagram as their promotion, they will do it differently because they'll be mixing it differently. They'll be cooking it differently to make it individual and hopefully unique for their company. And that's what we have to try and do, okay? So think about, I'm not gonna, it's a little bit difficult through chat, I know, but if you think about how McDonald's does its marketing compared to a local fast food chain, it will be quite different, won't it? Because one's got a lot of money and one probably hasn't. So they can use different angles, different ideas, but also they've got different objectives as well. So we'll move on from that because, as I said, I think that's a little bit difficult to have a discussion just now about it, and I'll go on to the companies. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm going to give you some examples. Now, I do hope, in some respects, that your first company that you work for is not necessarily as boring a product range as this one has. This was my first job out of university, and I do honestly believe that some of the most creative marketers are actually in the business-to-business market, because if you can manage to make some of these products interesting, you must be very creative, okay? Because it's very easy to make a chocolate bar attractive to a customer. How do you make an engineering product attractive to a customer? It's difficult, isn't it? How do you make cleaning cloths attractive compared to clothing? It is more difficult. So Barkston Plastics that I worked with, a company in Leeds, produced or distributed plastic sheeting and tubes. So you can see some of the pictures there about what they did. It also manufactured plastics. So all those shields that are going up in shops, the plastic clear shields going up in shops, the company that I worked with would have made those sort of things. So the product was very technical, but rather uninspiring. Especially if you're trying to do a promotional campaign or a brochure to show the products, it's a grey sheet of plastic, a white sheet of plastic with different qualities. My most exciting product was that one in the bottom right-hand side, which is Perspex, and it came in different colours, had 56 different colours. That was quite exciting, it had some colour. But most, as you can see, the tubes and the plastics are white, grey, beige colour, but very technical for specific purposes. They chose to distribute only in Yorkshire, and that's still the case now, 30 years later. And they had to really compete on price because the bigger companies who were national could always be lower on price. So they also had to have service as well. Now, in this case, most of the promotion was done via a sales team going into industry and just promoting the product, and through directories like Yellow Pages and websites and the like. There wasn't much creative promotion, not many leaflets. If there were leaflets, they were about information about the product, technical specs. So that was a rather boring product, really, but it still needed marketing. And I still needed to check on pricing. Then if we go to the next one, it's another business-to-business service. Next slide.
Why were they distributing only in Yorkshire, Dr. June?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The owner of the company, because it was a small company, started in Leeds. He had some on the east side of Leeds and he had some on the north of Leeds, and he just didn't want to get bigger, because then actually our prices would have to go up to deal with the extra administration. And in Yorkshire, property is cheap, one of the cheapest in the country. So if you went down to the south of England, his costs would be much more expensive. And there was lots of competition there. So he decided, because of personal reasons and also because of competition, that we would be better staying in Yorkshire. There was a little bit of work in Manchester, but only if people.
So the owner was happy in being small.
Yeah, they were happy in being a small local business that could deliver, and this is now 20 years ago, but could deliver next day, which was quite unusual then. We expect it now. If an Amazon parcel hasn't come in the next day, we want to know why, don't we? But 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't always the case. So yeah, I mean, that was their decision. Now, this next company, Initial UK, is a national, in fact, international company. Again, not a particularly exciting product. I was once Europe's largest buyer, or not largest, I bought the most dust mats in Europe. That's an exciting title to put on my job description, isn't it, on my CV? So you can see the dust mats there, and I know they're in many hotels and businesses where people have dust mats down, and every week or fortnight somebody comes to collect that dust mat and put a clean one down, and they wash the mat, and the following week they bring the mat back, put it down, take another one away for washing. And that's the same with the clothing that you can see there. Lots and lots of clothing, a very big industrial laundry, especially specialist as well for clean rooms and smelting, you know, if you're doing iron smelting, and also washroom services, which is what initially is known for more in the UK, because a lot of the public bathrooms, washrooms are supplied by Initial. But my product was dust mats. So even less expiring than probably plastic. But we were the cost leader, we were the price leader. So we were market leader in the UK. And I had 250 salespeople selling my product or service, which was massive, a very large fleet for distribution. And one of the things we did have as well was, I'm going to try and explain this, an effluent plant, a plant on site that would clean the water from the washing that we did. Because with the dry cleaning of the clothes, with the mats and all the dirt that gets into mats, we couldn't wash the products and put the effluent water back into the water system. We had to clean it first. So that meant we had a competitive advantage, because any company that tried to do it, if they didn't clean the water, we could contact the government and they would close them down. So that was quite useful. It cost a lot of money to have the effluent plant, but it meant that we were market leaders because we were the only people in the country that had that effluent plant. So price was always about being the lowest cost. We would go in very low, but I made a lot of money on it. £10 million on the turnover of £40 million just for the dust mats. Which is quite a huge profit margin. But that was a cash cow, which you've probably done with the Boston Consultancy Group Matrix, and the market was probably not growing anymore. So one of the things we had to do was make the product more attractive. So there's some ways of selling products, isn't it? You buy it more, buy more often, and I forgot what the third one is just now. Buy more often. I'll come to the third one in a minute. I just had a mental blank. So we got people really to buy more often and said, you know, fortnightly isn't good enough really. If you really believe in having a really clean environment, it's got to be weekly. So immediately we doubled our market from people going from fortnightly delivery to weekly delivery. So that increased the market. We brought out different colours. You could have all sorts of designs on your mat for your company, and more companies do that. So it's still a very competitive market actually, in UK and Europe and elsewhere. I'm sure you've all seen mats like this, and it's a phenomenal business actually. So moving on to a more exciting product potentially, slide 13. Christie. I was marketing director of Christie & Company, which now unfortunately no longer exists because of really how it didn't do its marketing well sometimes. Now this is a very good word to put into your vocabulary. Quintessentially, I can hardly say it myself, quintessentially English, which means that everything about the company embodied, embraced what is to be English about the product, okay? So you can see there a bowler hat, and we were the last company in the world to be able to make the traditional top hat and bowler hat. Other people make them now, but they're not in the traditional style. So that's an amazing product to have, you know, the traditional English bowler hat that nobody ever wears, and top hat that people only ever wear maybe at weddings or something like that, but we were able to make those. It had been around when I joined for over 200 years. It had its own bank and made its own banknotes 200-300 years ago. Winston Churchill, most of the kings of England, the Emperor of Japan, all sorts of people wore our hats. So you can imagine it was a really different type of product to the ones I've been talking to about before. And they came up with the slogan, if you want to get ahead, like ahead, get a hat. Okay? Because again, in the 50s, 1950s, every Englishman would wear a hat. But of course, we're now talking about the year, let's say 2000. Men didn't really wear hats in the UK or Europe, but they were starting to wear baseball caps. And I managed to get a new group, a pop group, to wear. We had a little range of baseball caps that nobody really wanted us to sell, but I said we had to get the younger market. And I got this pop band who were just beginning to start. I think they had number one in the charts, to wear our hats free of charge, and we just supplied them. And my boss said, no, that was not the image that a quintessential English company should have. That band was to take that. Now, can you imagine? I've just said this company has gone into decline. It's still a brand, but it doesn't manufacture. If we had got what was the biggest boy band in the world to wear our hats, this company would be in a different position to where it is now. But it didn't see that what we were doing was, if we go on to the next slide, really, which shows the different types of hats. What we were doing was we used to be Europe's largest manufacturer of hats. Then we became Europe's largest manufacturer of men's hats. Then we became British largest manufacturer of hats, British largest manufacturer of men's hats, the largest manufacturer in Britain of traditional hats. And our definition of market myopia, was getting smaller and smaller and smaller and more niche. And of course, the men's hats that you see there, the Panamas, the flat caps, the felt hats, and the bowler and top hat were all in declining markets. And we didn't pick up that young people were starting to wear hats again, but they were a different type of hat. And I still think that if 20 years ago a young person was wearing a flat cap, a baseball cap, they might be happier to then wear one of these hats when they get to 50 or 60, because they're used to wearing hats. And so this, as I said, I had an outlet in Harrods, so I had people who worked in Harrods for me. A fantastic product. The bowler hats, the top hat there would cost about £400 to buy. So not a cheap product at all. So the product was gorgeous, top of the range, high price. If we move on to the next slide. The company was over 200 years old, a lot of historical significance, because we almost had a museum of hats that had been worn by Winston Churchill, Edward VII. You know, people would have come and looked at that, but instead they were just stored in a storeroom, and nobody saw them. We had a lot of exports, but we weren't international. So we didn't develop products for the international market. The international market had to buy the products that we had. So, and we didn't really we didn't have a lot of international experience either. So the products are handmade, high priced, right at the top end. So one of the pictures I showed earlier, we had a woman on, she was Miss World. So we actually got people who, at that time, we actually got really famous people to wear our products for promotion as well. So it was handmade, significant. A lot of fashion designers would use our products, and we did make new things for them. So our catwalks, but not really a big market for them. The price was high. Promotion, all we did was have salespeople with great big bags or boxes, cases that they would take to a customer, a retailer, to sell. Only 4 people in England, well, in the UK. And distribution, I mentioned Harrods and a lot of department stores would sell our product. You see, those department stores in the UK are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and people are buying from fashion brands. So we also produced hats for Wimbledon and things like that as well. It was a lovely, lovely range. But the trouble is, this company did not see the changes. Whereas in 1920, everybody wore a hat. 1940, everybody wore a hat. By the time we get to the 21st century, nobody wears traditional hats like this. And so the company wasn't prepared to change. And it had a history of this, actually, because it used to make towels. And then somebody said, brought in towels to the UK, terry toweling. And somebody, the director said, no, this won't work. So one of the brothers said, well, I'm going to make them. And they made Christie towels, which is a very well-known brand in England and in the States, which is much more profitable than the hats are. Another company, another person brought in a new design, and they said, no, we don't want to do that. And then they went away and developed lots of business. And we just stuck with the hats. Incidentally, a little bit about pricing. If we made a hat that we sold to normal retailers for £10 and they'd sell it for £20, and then we made a hat that had a different label in, we sold it for £12, the retailer could sell it for £100. And the only difference was in the hat was the label. And that's the power of designer brands, because we did quite a lot of products for Yves Saint Laurent and other big brands and designers. And all we did was put a different label in, maybe slightly different fabric that might cost 20p more, but the product could be sold for 5 times more at retail because it was a designer brand. So that's the power of branding, if you get it right. But yes, they've got to put a lot of advertising in place and promotion to get people to be prepared to pay £100. But actually, it's only cost us 20p more to make the product. Okay, let's go on. Anybody got any questions at this stage?
So the company was stuck in making the products. An example of marketing myopia, is that correct?
Yeah, so that was marketing myopia is very much when you don't see what else is going on outside your customer base or your market. And so you become so focused that you forget that things are changing. So
yes, you become focused on the product rather than the market.
Yeah, very much so. So like the hat company was like that because it just focused on the product. And basically the customers were dying. You know, they were getting old. It's old men in the UK that wear the little caps and things like that. So instead of looking back and going, oh, look, there is a market for hats, but it's a different type of hat. Maybe we can develop that market. They did move a little bit and realised women were wearing the hats as well. And so they did expand a bit into the female market, but that wasn't enough. And so that's marketing myopia. So you see it with the watch industry, the companies that didn't, unless they were very, very expensive watches, that didn't go digital, now are out of business. And there's all sorts of other industries.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, so that's what marketing myopia is.
Many companies do get stuck in this kind of a myopia.
Yeah, it's so easy. It's so easy. And going back as well, many companies fail to know what their customers like as well. They just assume they know who their customer is, and the customer may have changed over time.
Do people still wear hats in the UK these days?
Which boy band? I'll just write it in case you couldn't.
Yeah.
They're not a boy band anymore. They're a 50-year-old band. But take that. So they were world #1 boy band at one point. and I got them free. I couldn't believe it before they became too famous, and my boss wouldn't let me continue with it. I was disappointed. Anyway, so lessons learned. If we go to the next slide. So I think it's slide 21. I said this before, I think the most creative marketers are often in business to business. So if you find out you end up going to a business and business environment, don't believe that you're second rate to somebody who's got a fashion product or a food product or a high-tech product, because actually to make products attractive in a business to business environment, you need an awful lot of creativity, because there are only so many ways you can sell a sheet of plastic, promote a sheet of plastic. Lessons learned from Christie, the hat company. You cannot rely on past capital. It doesn't matter if you're a supplier to the Queen of England or whatever. You can't rely on it. You still got to look for new markets and differentiation, and also market extension as well. So it's really important. I've said there as well, exporting is not the same as international or global marketing. If we were doing international marketing, we would have made sure we had a range of hats for the Jewish market, which we did have some for the United States, but they wear a certain style of hat. We might have looked for, what we really were looking at was ex-Commonwealth countries, or Commonwealth countries, and expats, British people in other countries. And we could have expanded that so much more. And then linked to that, somebody's got their microphone on, right? Linked to that, sometimes it's not necessary to adapt your product to export, sometimes it is. And what I also want to say is money isn't everything when it comes to promotion. I didn't mention about promotion budgets. My biggest budget was for the dust mats. I hardly had any budget for things like the plastic and the hats, and yet we did an awful lot of things. Now, obviously, with hats, it's easy. You get a famous person wearing your hat, you can take some photos, and you get a lot of promotion from that. We didn't have social media then. It would have gone all over social media if we could say that was our hat. But you can be very creative with not a lot of money in terms of promotion, especially now with social media and digital marketing. But if you want to be serious about marketing, you do have to make sure that you do have some resources available, so you can take advantage of situations. So when the Japanese emperor had, I can't remember whether his son was getting married, somebody was getting married, we took advantage of that, and we had to prepare 100 top hats for the event, and we made sure we got enough promotion out of that as well. So I had to get a bit more money for that, but most of the money, literally, I had about £5,000 to promote that product range, and we got a huge amount of traction from that. So we go on to the next slide about keeping on the right side of the law. And just very quickly, I wanted to talk about being an expert witness in marketing, because one day you might be able to be an expert witness in whatever your specialism is. When you go to court, and or not when you go to court, I hope you don't have to. When you watch court cases, there's often an expert maybe in fingerprinting or about psychology. There might be a psychologist there or some medical person. I'm an expert in marketing. And I've just noticed actually that police helmet was actually made by my hat company that I worked with as well. We made police helmets. And I'm an expert witness in intellectual property, which often is about branding and sometimes about new product development, and for contract law, which is about when an organisation promises more than they can keep. So the next few slides, and I'll go through them very quickly, about some of the expert witness cases that I've done that I'm allowed to talk about. There's one that I might not be allowed to talk about, but I haven't particularly put the names on the headings. So if we go on to the next slide. Now, have you heard of the Gap? It's a American clothing brand. I know it has outlets often at airports and certainly has a lot of outlets in the UK. And a clothing brand that is international. There's no doubt about that. And they've been based in the UK for a long time and have retailers there. The chocolate bar, sorry, if we go back up a slide to the chocolate bar. Brilliant. The chocolate bar there is from Cadbury's and it's called Fuse. I don't know whether, we don't see it much in the UK now. But Cadbury's wanted to call their new chocolate bar the Gap chocolate bar. And the Gap clothing firm took them to court to say, no, that will cause confusion in the marketplace. And believe it or not, they won. And that's why the chocolate bar became called Fuse. And it was because of my evidence that they won. Now, their copyright, intellectual property, branding was all about clothing. But a lot of clothing companies have cafes in their shops in the UK. And so they argued that they could sell their own chocolate in the cafe and that would be called Gap. And their brand was so strong that if something's called Gap, people will think it's theirs. So Cadbury had to change the name of their chocolate bar to Fuse. That was at one point, about 10 years ago, the #1 chocolate bar in the UK. And it had to have its name changed because somebody didn't do their marketing properly and check that the name was available for them to use. We go on to the next slide. Anybody do snowboarding? One of the main brands in snowboarding, which I think is a very dangerous sport and I wouldn't do, but anyway, it looks fun, is called Burton. But there's a big retailer in the UK called the Burton Group. And it was okay when this American company, Burton Snowboards, was selling snowboards. That was okay because it's not clothing. But then they started to sell snowboarding clothes with the name Burton, for Burton Snowboards, written on the back of a lot of their clothes. Just when hoodies were becoming a fashion item. So Burton Menswear took them to court and I had to give evidence. This is in the High Court in London. First time I ever had to give evidence. And the evidence I gave was that Burton's Menswear was such a well-known name in the UK that any clothing with the name Burton on, and they're targeted at the same audience, young men mainly, would immediately be confusing to people. And so Burton Snowboards just said, oh, we didn't know. We didn't know there was a Burton Menswear. We didn't do our market research before we came into the country. And they lost the case. And they lost the case during my evidence, which was absolutely amazing to do. You know, you give evidence and then somebody settles the case. But that's really important, that if you go and do any marketing, you choose a name, you make sure the name isn't being used elsewhere for similar products. Okay. Then if we go on to the next slide, slide 25. This is probably the one I shouldn't talk about because it didn't go to court. But again, it's about a clothing brand, which you can probably see there by the name. And, oh, we've missed a slide. And against a French fashion designer. And this just shows the importance of product development because the French fashion designer designed a garment 40 years ago and then claimed that the Gap, the retail brand, had copied it. And on this occasion, the Gap lost because they couldn't show how they developed the product. And so maybe somebody had copied it. I'm sure they didn't, but nobody kept a record of their new product development process. So that just shows the importance of new product development process, recording every step. Why did this cardigan end up with 13 buttons, exactly the same as the French designer's cardigan? There's probably a good reason for it if you look at the design process and how people went, oh, 12 buttons doesn't look right, let's add another one. you know. And if they'd recorded that, then the Gap would have won. But the Gap had no product development process. They have now because I've helped them. And so they lost. They didn't go to court because they had to settle out of court beforehand. So that just shows, in this case, new product development. Let's go on to the next slides. So that was just highlighting the product development part of marketing. It's really important that people forget about it as we move to looking at promotion. Then look at the next slide, contract law. So slide 27. Some of the other cases I've been to is about a fair price and what is a designer brand. So I won't talk about those at the moment because of the time, but clients bought what they thought were designer brands at a high price, only to find that when they received the items, clothing, they were not designer brands. And so that was a contract law thing about not giving what you promised. But the one I thought was quite interesting is agency-client relationships. Some of you may end up working for agencies or consultancies, and it's very easy to promise a customer more than you can really promise, more than's in your control. So an example of this one that I've been to court with, and this was a Scottish court, which is quite different, was a public relations agency promised their client that they could get about 20 reporters coming to a product launch if they hosted it in a big hotel with a free breakfast. So the client spent a lot of money for them, because they're a small business, on getting a nice venue, organising breakfast and inviting journalists, reporters. Not one person turned up. And so the client sued the agency because they spent a lot of money. Now, normally, that can happen. Something big could have happened. There could have been a fire down the road and all the reporters had gone to that fire. You can't promise what reporters are going to do on that day. It could have just been a bad day, all on holiday. Who knows? So you can't promise anything as an agency. You can just say, if you do this, there is a good possibility that you will get a number of reporters interested. But because the agency hadn't said that, they were sued and they had to pay the client a lot of money or money back. And so there's a lot of this about agencies promising and over-promising. I have to be careful. I can say to somebody, oh yeah, I can do that next week. And then I'll look at my diary and go, no chance. You know, I have to be careful about what I promise because otherwise it becomes part of a contract. And then if you don't adhere to that contract, you could be sued. And so if you're in marketing, if you're in HR and you end up working for some form of agency, please make sure that you don't promise what you cannot do. Certainly what I try to do, and sometimes I forget, is to try and say, give myself an extra week or two and try and produce the item or the report a week early, rather than promise them a week early and then I end up being a week late. So that's it really. My next slide was really about doing some group work, but I think that would be too difficult to do in groups. But maybe you want to consider a company that's been in the press for the wrong reasons. So H&M have been in the press in the UK because they've been, in Europe, because they've been storing their clients, storing their staff's personal data wrongly. Interesting. But most of the time it's because of something about the product or about overcharging, or it could be about intellectual property having the same logo or name. I'll just say now, if you know of any, you know, when you say, what do you think the future is for those companies, it's likely to be quite negative. And I think in terms of the coronavirus pandemic that we've got, there's a lot of companies, and this is in the UK, so obviously I can't I echo this, I don't know, maybe you can tell me. There have been a lot of companies that have done some very, very good things. They've really been supportive of the communities of their customers. I've got companies who are restaurants that have been producing food for people who can't go out and get their food. Hotels that have been made available for people, hotels near hospitals that have made themselves available free of charge for people who have got relatives in hospital and want to stay closer but can't stay at the hospital. All sorts of things. But there's also been some companies that have tried to benefit too much or have not been sympathetic to the customer. And I suspect they will not succeed as well when lockdown and all the things that are happening finish. But the ones that have supported their customers and the communities, I hope, will grow and develop, get good customer base. So, you know, it's really important about public relations, and we have to think about that. Sorry, I've done a lot of talking. Some of that's because we are virtual. I usually do a lot of question and answers along the way. Don't you have any questions or comments? I always love to hear about what's going on in India, your country, your area, your region.
Well, in India, I can tell you, many companies are trying to get a cure for coronavirus, and we got a Indian brand which almost launched a product saying that it is a cure for the virus. But the government had to step in and say, well, you have not tried it, you have not done trials on it, how can you sell it? So the brand suffered, and the company also suffered in the process, I think. A lot of comments on social media, and you know, the company had dreams of becoming a very big FMCG company, but now the dreams have stalled. Part of the reason is that they made very big plans, and the quality of the product was very good, or was not tried.
That's the problem about being first to market, isn't it? People rush to be first to market, and sometimes don't realise that there are systems and processes to go through, especially with a cure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I'm surprised nobody took them to court.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a question here from Vandama about why did Christie choose retail outlets as the distribution channels? In the UK, they did mainly go direct to retail outlets, big and small. So we also supplied big companies like Marks and Spencer's, but really they didn't bring any profit. Lots of volume, lots of sales, but not much profit, very little. So because it was a consumer brand, they would tend to go to retail outlets. They also did riding hats, and they could go to distributors. So there was a middleman. And when we were with overseas sales, we used agents in those countries. So the agents sometimes bought product and then sold it. And sometimes the agents would send us direct to the retailers. People want to touch, and when it's clothing, and there's other products like this, people want to touch and feel. That's why not all clothing will ever be sold over the internet, because we want to touch and feel it before we buy it. It was embarrassing when my children were little. I suddenly realised that as we went round shops, one of my daughters was picking up clothes and touching it and putting it back. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's what I do all the time. And she just learnt it from me, you know, because there is that sensory element of textile. So that's why we couldn't use other forms of distribution, or didn't use. Any other questions?
Well, please feel free to ask questions, anybody. And I see our Dean, Dr. Nilesh Khare, has also joined us. So welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. I just don't want to interrupt it. I think this is good. So it's a student's chance. So please go ahead. You won't get a chance to ask questions from someone who has actually been there, done that.
I'll just say one thing. I did a degree in engineering and then started in marketing in an engineering environment. But I only really knew if I was good at doing marketing when I did my MBA. My MBA was focused on marketing, but my MBA taught me a lot of things that some of it I was doing naturally, but didn't know it's the right thing to do. And other things my MBA did was to help me structure what I did as a marketer. And it's the same if you're going into human resources, human resource management, accounting, finance. The MBA is a brilliant foundation to provide that structure for you to hold on to when you're trying to be creative, when you're trying to find an answer to a problem that you've got. So I'm really pleased to see that the group is so much bigger now than it was when it first started. In terms of 10 years ago, probably a cohort of 15 students, and now it's 50 or more. Brilliant. The other thing I'm finding interesting, sorry.
No, please continue. Yeah.
The other thing I'm finding interesting is that I've been an academic for 20 years and I'm now running my own business. And I've been an academic in marketing. And yet sometimes it's easier to teach than it is to do. It's still really difficult, especially when my business is me, to promote me. You know, I can think of 101 things I want to do differently. Trying to work out my pricing strategy. You know, if you ever go self-employed, I don't know about you, but I feel embarrassed about talking about how much I cost. But you have to get to grips with all of that. So marketing still works when it's just one person and you're the product and the service and everything else. So I've really enjoyed these last 6 months. They've been challenging to me to relearn my marketing and put it into practice, and especially social media. 30 years ago, I had a phone. It was huge. I got 15 minutes for £15. Now I can get for £20 a phone that takes me around the world, you know, a month. So it's changed so much. Nice to see some of your faces, by the way. It's always a bit strange. It's always a bit strange talking to a blank wall. So thank you for those of you.
I think we run into the bandwidth problem. I have faced the bandwidth problem several times.
Yeah.
So sometimes people actually switch off their cameras because of the bandwidth issues.
No, I get that. I do understand that. And especially when you're working from home as well. Like I said at the beginning, I'm working in my kitchen. It's lunchtime in the UK now. So I'm expecting different members of the family to slowly start looking through the door at 12:30 to see if they can come in to start making their food. We're all working in different places, whether that be bedrooms, kitchens, wherever you can find. And so not everybody wants to show their pictures either, you know, which is understandable.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I was actually thinking, I know Dr. Dinesh was alluding to, I think, Coronel brand. And I think the company brand was actually getting diluted for the unrelated diversification anyway. There have been several interesting stories in India with the noodle brand issues, with the soft drink issues. Soft drink, I mean, there have been the bad press, and I mean, there have been examples of it during recent times when companies. So I know for one company that's in the ad tech market, I am sure that you guys have learned about the brand called Upgrade, which is started by an entrepreneur from Bombay. He actually had decided first to cut his employees. So nobody knew what's going to happen with COVID and how the market is going to respond. So he had actually slashed employees' salaries. And then when they realized that the market response was very good for their products and people sitting at home wanting to upgrade, so there were many people came. So their revenues actually were much more than what they were expecting. He decided to actually go back to employees and gave them back whatever they had lost and some bonus. So I think there are examples of companies that have done extraordinary thing in terms of taking care of employees, giving them support, and there are examples on the other sides too.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, isn't it, the next few years? And I think, again, doing study now, especially at master's level, I wouldn't want to do it necessarily at undergraduate level myself at the moment. In the UK, it's very strange. But at master's level gives you a good opportunity for those of you who are still looking for a job. That when we're finished with coronavirus and can get back to nearly normal, that you've now got this new shiny qualification that you can go into the marketplace with. I think that's excellent timing.
Yeah, I think I have a good news to share from that perspective with this batch. The batch that graduated in 2020, one of the person from that batch today got a job with PwC. So
Very good.
I think we are beginning to make a headway into some top brands in terms of job opportunities for students. It all depends in terms of what you want to walk away with, and that depends on what you do from the day one.
Yeah, and as more of the alumni, more of your students get these jobs, they will start looking. Those employers will start looking to this course for their next intake of staff. It's a positive circle.
Yeah, I think so. Many more questions. We are waiting for the question. I'm sure that the guys have questions, right?
You can write them down if you like.
Yeah, write them down if you like, or there was just ask away. Karan, if you're trying to speak, you're on mute.
I wasn't trying to speak, sir. I did have a question though. It just came to me. This is about your work as an expert witness in the courts. So, has there ever been a time when the court decision went against what you wanted? Perhaps, maybe you felt that perhaps the court decision was wrong. Has there ever been such a case?
It's interesting. As an expert witness, often one is appointed by one of the sides, but you can be appointed as a joint expert, a single joint expert for both sides. But regardless, I have to be independent. Now that is very difficult. If one side is paying you, obviously they're finding the expert that is likely to give them the answer that they want. I don't think there's been a time when it's actually gone against, because I don't think I would take on a case where I thought I was trying to make a case for what I thought was wrong, But I have done 2 criminal cases. And what's different with the business cases is that that if somebody's wrong, they pay money. In a criminal case, if somebody's wrong, they go to prison. And I find that a very heavy responsibility, personally. In both cases that I did, and I had to give evidence to a jury, which again was unusual, my evidence would not determine whether they were guilty or not. They were both guilty. But how many months or years they would probably stay in prison for. But I decided, especially after the second one, that I would not do criminal cases again, because I didn't like the fact that it was making such an impact on an individual person. Even though, one was they were definitely both crooks, but I just didn't feel comfortable. You get paid a lot of money to do this role, but when you're in court, you earn every penny of that money. It's very stressful. But very interesting, because I've had to justify what is the right price for something. And if you think in marketing or economics, we say the right price is when a customer's prepared to pay what the supplier is asking for, what the supplier wants. And that's the right price. But sometimes that price is not right, because the customer doesn't know everything about the product. And this was one of the criminal cases. Was it a fair price that people were paying? And the answer was they were prepared to pay it. Marketing says it's a fair price, but actually there are other issues relating to that. Like in this case, the products weren't designer clothes, and the person said they were, and so the price should have been a lot lower. But if somebody's prepared to buy it, you know, and so it really makes me think about the fundamentals of what I know as an academic and as a marketing practitioner, because I'm asked questions like that. And I find that really intriguing to have to be challenged about what I've learned and taught about marketing.
So I just wanted to butt in here. I think the questions in the conversation that we are having actually goes to the heart of business ethics as it relates to marketing. Right?
Yeah.
And then so in economics, as June was talking about, we always talk about the free will of the consumers. Economists assume that the consumers are fully rational. There's also another assumptions about complete information. So in the utopian world where you have complete information, everybody is a rational consumer who is maximizing their own benefits or preferences. You haven't compelled anybody, right? If you are not a essential product, and if you're not a monopoly supplier, then it's out of their free will that they've decided to give you the money that they have decided to give you, right? In that sense, it seems like completely fair. The problem in the fairness, in more so in a social world, and I have probably requested everybody to watch the Social Dilemma movie or documentary, and then you would see. I have no idea, June, if you have watched that. It's a fantastic documentary recently released on Netflix, Social Dilemma.
Okay, we have Netflix.
Yep. Everybody has Netflix everywhere.
My children have Netflix, so let me use it.
But I think it's actually worth watching because they're talking about the algorithms with the big social media firms that are meant to watch you all the time and give you the world to you, which you think is actually coming to you without knowing that you're being manipulated into that world, which echoes you and nudges you and exploits your psychological vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And that's where the ethics and markets comes into play, because when you advertise, the consumers are no longer free consumers. You are actually trying to exploit their vulnerabilities. And if people who are susceptible to that vulnerabilities are willing to pay you money, which is way more than what should be the fair price, is it still fair or free? Right? So it seems like fair and free. And I think that takes me, so June, I would echo your concerns, right? As an economist, strategist, and academic, I do think about ethical issues here. And I mean, these are some very profound fundamental things about how we have built society.
And there's an awful lot of ethical issues that are coming up now because of the technology and the information that we can have. Whether that be the ethics of AI, because it's what we put in that comes out, and that's quite scary. I've written some papers on right at the beginning of technology where your phones could identify where you were and for promotional purposes. I wrote papers about that, about the cheap price of data that we give away. We're prepared to give away an awful lot on our phone to get a free coffee somewhere. And now it's so much that we can give away. And yet we do it because we actually want to know where the nearest petrol station is, or to get that free coffee, or as we walk past the store to find that we've got a special gift waiting for us. But we give away so much data in the meantime. And as marketers, I think we have to, and managers generally, because of the ethical element across the board, we have to determine where we are on that line, and we'll all be in different places, and how we make sure that marketing and business is not seen as being manipulative, because that's not what marketing's about. It's about getting the right product to the right person at the right time. You know, the product that they need or want. I understand want, but certainly the product that they need, and not making them need it. I know there's ADA, awareness, make people aware, get them an interest and desire, but there's how far does desire get manipulated? And that's it's a really topical area, and it's an area that is likely to put marketing in disrespect if we don't disrepute, if we don't deal with it.
So I don't know if I'm actually quoting out of Social Dilemma, but I recently read this. So June, you would be aware, I worked with Henley Center for some time, Henley, the marketing research company with WPP Group. So Europe has norms in marketing and advertising, which are very restrictive in terms of what you can advertise, to whom you can advertise, and when you can advertise. There have always been these norms for particular children. So the prime times and the children times, what you can and cannot advertise. Suddenly you actually come to the online world when kids are actually playing online, and then there are all kinds of pop-ups that are there, and there are no time restrictions and no things. So again, going back to your points, right, that how much are you manipulating those desires? So what you need, and then are you actually manipulating the desire and creating need and demands out of that manipulation? Yeah, I think these are the future leaders of tomorrows are here, and I think we have probably given them good dose of the ethical sensitivity that they will have to grapple with. June, I know that we have already kind of overshot the time. I think it was supposed to end about 20 minutes back or 30 minutes back. I do not know.
I think it's was it now? You're okay. It was now.
Yeah, are we within time? Fantastic. Okay, so glad. I was a bit worried that if we are actually encroaching your time, that you have kids in a commitment with the families and other people.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Not a problem.
Yeah, because sometimes we can be very hungry for some of these things, right? Dr. Dinesh, over to you.
Well, it's been a very session, sir. Dr. June Dennis took us on a journey of cooking and hats, and it's been a very wonderful session, and I was seeing the students were very interested. So thank you, Dr. June Dennis. It's been a pleasure having you with us, and I hope we can organize another session sometime later on. You would like to say something, sir?
Oh, yeah. I mean, thank you so much. I know that you are busy. You agreed to give us your time and share your experiences and insights with us. Very, very thankful to you for this. If any of the students would want to say anything.
Anybody can say anything. Karan, Asta, Shifali.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself. And then on behalf of the students.
I know you want to say anyone. Ma'am, I just want to say thank you for your knowledge and everything. It was pleasure to meet you on video chat. So again, we all want to meet you again for new and topics on.
Thank you. And if any of you do come to Yorkshire, which is where I'm based, I'm happy to try and make you a Yorkshire pudding. Okay.
We love that. We just love that. Absolutely.
I just take pride.
Yeah. So June, here is the invite and the assurance. If we would love to have you in India once this COVID goes away and we can all travel, and then please be our guest. Bhopal is a very nice city. We would love to have you here in person as well. And then if I happen to be in the UK, I would trouble you for sure.
Brilliant. Yes, I've been to Bhopal and I've been around the lake, and I know it's a very beautiful city. It's lovely. So thank you. Well, have a lovely weekend, everybody. And I hope to see you all at some point, maybe in person at some point. Good luck in your studies.
Thank you so much. You have a lovely day, rest of the day. Everyone, thank you so much. I just want to remind you that we have the leadership session at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you so much. See you there.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.